At El Pollo Enfermo, come get our new $2.99 crap wrap.
El Pollo Enfermo, toma un chance. El Pollo Enfermo, ahorre mucho.
Yes, industrially ground up parts of chicken are lovingly mixed with gluten, binders, artificial chicken flavorings, fried in seed oil and combined with processed cheese food and non-organic lettuce and tomato, and laid on a lard-based refined white flour tortilla. The extra MSG makes it taste so good, RFK Jr. doesn't want you to have it. And at $2.99, the price makes up for the fact that it contains over 1,100 man-made chemicals in every wrap. So come on down to El Pollo Enfermo and get our $2.99 crap wrap. Available only in America, not legal at any of our European locations. Take a chance, save a lot at El Pollo Enfermo.
El Pollo Enfermo, toma un chance, ahorre mucho.
Boy, RFK Jr. is going to outlaw those for sure, so get them quick. Welcome to Mark Mosley Show. I'm Mark Mosley. Follow me on social media. Yes, that same social media that is contributing to the rapid decline and destruction of our society on so many fronts. Let's go scream at each other in all caps on X, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube at Mark Mosley. No, I don't have TikTok because I don't need to learn how to ingest household cleaning products. I learned not to do that by the time I was 3. But the Chinese government wants you to know that all the cool kids are eating Kaboom toilet cleaner. It's so foamy and blue. Coming up on this episode, we salute a great man who left us this week, a man who made a lasting impression on me. Of course, I'm talking about Alfred Glenn Mosley, my father. But first, let's talk about the guy that everyone in the world has been talking about nonstop for the last week. And here's where I want to start. Genesis 50:20. Joseph tells his brothers, who had sold him into slavery years before, "You meant evil against me, but God meant it for good, to bring it about that many people should be kept alive as they are today." If you know the story of Joseph, his brothers were jealous and they plotted to kill him. In the end, they sold him into slavery instead. He made his way into Egypt and fell into the good graces of the Pharaoh, wind up helping save the Egyptian people from a famine because he was able to interpret the Pharaoh's dreams. And he became a rich and famous man, and his brothers come along all those years later and find that their brother has not only prospered from the evil that they did to him, but he also forgives them. It is a tragic and evil thing that happened to Charlie, but there are now so many unintended consequences and good things that have come from it. It's kind of like COVID brought a lot of people to God. So has the assassination of Charlie Kirk. An awakening is happening. Here's one anecdote.
I think it's honestly disturbing.
Gigi Gandhi was never a fan of Charlie Kirk. As a transgender woman, she often found his comments hurtful. Yet in her opinion, he was speaking a direct truth.
Transgender women being men, yes, we're men, embrace it. We were born that way, and that's why we changed to be who we are today.
Gigi says she's disgusted and appalled at some social media posts celebrating Kirk's death.
Being transgender and, all these other transgender individuals saying, hip, hip, hooray. It's not a hip, hip, hooray moment. This is a man with a family, with kids.
Adding to her concern are reports from several media outlets, including the Wall Street Journal, citing an unverified internal bulletin from the ATF that some of the cartridges found with a recovered rifle were inscribed with wording expressing transgender and anti-fascist ideology. Authorities have not confirmed that publicly.
We're even more at risk now. I just feel like it's a different light being shed onto transgenders now, which is more hateful light.
The fear is not new for Gigi. Last May, a man slashed her tires at a gas station in Studio City. The attack was caught on camera, but no arrest was ever made. She warns her community to be aware of the growing intolerance.
To the other trans individuals, I would say watch what you're putting online, because it's going to come back and bite us all in the ass. And whether you're on the left or the right, we're all human at the end of the day.
Yes, it's an anecdote, but I always say when you're on the right and you don't have the media on your side, all you have is anecdotes. So we'll take it. The day after Charlie Kirk died, millions and millions of Americans who had never even heard the name Charlie Kirk suddenly were introduced to him. And he was the most watched person on social media over the last week by a wide margin. My members of my family had never heard of Charlie Kirk. My mom didn't know who he was. So many people I know. But they know him now. They know his words. They know the truth about him in his own words. And I compare it to the attempted assassination of Donald Trump. The people that tried to do that, the people that tried to kill Trump, did the world a huge favor, because Trump became more powerful than ever. After that, I always say the moment in 2016 when Trump won the 2016 election was when he said to Hillary, because you'd be in jail. And that was when 1 million people jumped up off their couch and went, oh, my goodness, the stones on this guy to say something like that to Hillary Clinton on television. I have to vote for this man. Well, the moment in 2020 when Trump won the presidency was when he stood up with blood on his face, pumped his fist in the air and said, fight, fight, fight. That was the moment that he won the White House. And they all know it. All those dark people in the shadows on the left, they all know it. They know that trying to have him killed backfired in a major, major way. And so it is with Charlie Kirk. A whole bunch more people are waking up to the wisdom that so much of the mindset of so many modern leftists is just so dark. Now, listen, let me clarify something here. When I talk about the left on my show, on this podcast, I'm not talking about the little folks, the regular run-of-the-mill everyday leftists who, I don't mean to sound condescending, but you just don't know any better. You don't. I'm talking about the people that lead you. I'm talking about the people in power, the glitterati, if you will, the elites, the leaders of the left. We have seen so much evil and so much darkness, so much celebration of Charlie Kirk's death. And I've heard it from lots of different sources that meanwhile, churches were filled last Sunday. I've seen anecdotes about men saying, I'm going to get involved in my local school board. If a sliver of those who say in a moment of great passion that they're going to make changes, we're going to have a major cultural shift. If a sliver of those people that say they're going to do it follow through, you know, in the Bible, God's always working with a remnant of people all through the Old Testament. It was a remnant. And then, of course, those 11 apostles started a movement that never died and eventually came to be preached to the whole world. Now, not that the left hasn't enjoyed some success with their dark propaganda. The plurality of Americans surveyed in a YouGov poll brought into the false narrative that the alleged assassin of Turning Point USA founder Charlie Kirk is a Republican. Several notable figures rushed to claim that Tyler Robinson was a conservative Christian, even though Republican Utah Governor Spencer Cox and federal authorities later confirmed that Robinson became deeply indoctrinated with leftist ideology. The poll, this was an early poll, of course, nevertheless found out that 24% of all adults had bought into the idea that he was a Republican because you wanted to. Confirmation bias is a real thing. In comparison, 21% of all adults believed he was a Democrat. 15% said neither. 40% said they were unsure. Now, this comes after a concerted media effort across Facebook, Reddit, X, and other places. Robinson's family told authorities he'd become more political and hateful in recent years. He had lived with his self-proclaimed transgender boyfriend, Lance Twiggs, whose own relative says he hates conservatives and Christians. He hated us. This is his family, the roommate's family talking. He was not raised that way, but he, over the years, has become really detached and been radicalized. Meanwhile, a growing number of adults across the U.S. who define themselves as very liberal believe it is, quote, always or usually acceptable, unquote, to be happy about the death of a public figure they dislike. Among conservative and very conservative people, 90% and 91% said it is always or usually unacceptable. A quarter of very liberal participants also said that political violence can sometimes be justified. Most very liberal participants justifying political violence are between the ages of 18 and 29, the poll found. Many liberals, especially educators, teachers, and professors, have been fired for openly celebrating Charlie Kirk's death. Middle Tennessee State University fired Assistant Dean Laura Sosh Lightsley for writing on Facebook that she has zero sympathy for Kirk. Famously now, MSNBC political analyst Matthew Dowd got the boot for alleging that Kirk brought his own assassination onto himself. The Washington Post also fired columnist Karen Attiah for falsely stating that he'd made an offensive remark about black women. We'll get to that later. We're going to debunk some of those things. The Nation, which is funded by George Soros, published a piece titled Charlie Kirk's Legacy Deserves No Mourning, which also falsely asserted the claim that Kirk said black women do not have the processing power, a brain processing power, to be taken seriously. He was speaking about specific people. But so many people have lost their jobs over this nonsense, including now, it appears, late night talk show host Jimmy Kimmel. Sinclair Broadcast Group pulled Jimmy Kimmel Live off of 24 ABC stations after Jimmy falsely linked Charlie Kirk's assassination to MAGA, even though by the time he did it, we knew better. And he knew better than to do it.
We hit some new lows over the weekend with the MAGA gang desperately trying to characterize this kid who murdered Charlie Kirk as anything other than one of them and doing everything they can to score political points from it.
This is dark, dark stuff, guys. This is civil war is brewing. You cannot share a society. You can't share a country with people who feel this way. I know someone personally. I'm not going to say who it is or even hint at who it is because I don't want that person to get a visit from the Secret Service. But I know someone who said that Charlie got what he deserved and that he hoped the same thing would happen to President Trump. I really think Trump ought to put together a group to have some kind of summit to pull people like John Fetterman and Bill Maher and folks that are on the left but are at least reasonable and willing to talk. There have been a number of people that have surprised me on the left. Rainn Wilson, who is not a Republican, who said, I don't agree with anything that Charlie Kirk said or stood for, but he says, I defend his right to say it, and that should not have happened to him.
Hey, Soul Boom fam, these are really dangerous, tragic times. I wanted to address the recent assassination/murder of Charlie Kirk. I didn't always agree with him, but this whole idea of I'm going to kill someone that I disagree with is disgusting and dangerous. And our hearts go out to him, his soul, his wife, his kids, and all of his family and supporters. He was a courageous man, actually. He was unafraid to speak his truth and would go often into hostile environments in order to do that. And how many of us have that same courage?
From Rainn Wilson, star of The Office.
I am a victim of a hate crime. Stanley knows what I'm talking about.
That's not what a hate crime is.
Well, I hated it.
Trump ought to bring together as many Democrats in Congress as he can find. Now, there may only be a handful who are not ghouls, who are not anarchistic, nihilistic wackadoos like so many are. I mean, AOC and Ilhan Omar and some of the things that they said are absolutely horrifying. And at the same time, the left calls for us to tone down the hateful rhetoric. You first. You first. We just lost one of our guys. You go first. We'll follow. I promise we'll follow. So many people have lost their jobs over this nonsense, including, now it appears, late night talk show host Jimmy Kimmel. Sinclair Broadcast Group, now they own ABC affiliates. And they pulled Jimmy Kimmel Live off of their 24 ABC stations after he falsely linked Charlie Kirk's assassination to MAGA. Nexstar Media preempted too. ABC has now suspended the show indefinitely. Sinclair is demanding Kimmel apologize and donate to Kirk's family. Now, of course, the left is trying to blame Trump for ABC's taking the show off the air. And now there are calls to boycott ABC and Disney. Nalini Stamp, organizing director of the pro-labor union political group Working Families Party, shared a viral boycott resource guide online that says Jimmy Kimmel wasn't suspended because of what he said. He was suspended because the FCC threatened his employer. That's state-sanctioned censorship, and it's a giant red flag. Authoritarianism isn't coming. It's already here. Today it's Jimmy. Tomorrow it's the rest of us. Grassroots political advocacy group 50501, which shared Stamp's boycott effort, said, quote, the government is using absurd accusations of hate speech to silence comedians who offend the wannabe king. I see. So Charlie Kirk engaged in, quote, hate speech, and he shot and killed. But what Jimmy Kimmel said isn't hate speech, and he shouldn't expect any reaction from America, from his not hate speech. Got it. Got it. Two sets of standards. Typical. By the way, Jimmy Kimmel's ratings were way off. 43%. He was only averaging 130,000 viewers in the 18 to 49 demo. That's the money demo. Those are who the advertising rates are based on. 43% since Trump got back into office. Since Trump got back into office. Since Trump got back into office, his ratings are down 43%. Maybe the drip, drip, drip of anti-Trump rhetoric on his show every single night had something to do with his ratings being down since Trump got back into office. And I've seen a lot of garbage about this Jimmy Kimmel thing. And you should know that he was given a chance to walk this all back. Surely, after 24 hours, someone took him aside and said, you know, what you said was debunked. But according to The Hollywood Reporter, here's what went down inside of ABC. Multiple conversations with Kimmel were had at the executive level. They wanted to know how was Kimmel going to address the situation on the following show. Jimmy Kimmel's answer was not satisfactory to management. He didn't want to apologize. The situation became a safety issue as everyone who was ever on a Kimmel press release got their emails doxxed. Not a fan of that. Come on, guys, we got to do better. Said that show publicists even received death threats. Not a fan of that. Not a fan of that, guys. Come on, guys. We got to do better than that. Disney wanted Kimmel to address the situation in a way that would take down the temperature. But what he had planned was going to fan the flames with the MAGA fan base. Kimmel was defending what he said as being grossly mischaracterized by a certain group of people. Well, did you say what you said or did you not? I don't know. There's no wiggle room there, bro. Talks between Kimmel and Disney ABC hit enough of a stalemate that executives decided Wednesday's episode of Jimmy Kimmel Live had run out of time to be salvaged. The studio audience was even lined up outside, ready to come in and watch the taping. By this point, 66 of the roughly 200 affiliate stations, or over one quarter, said they would not carry the episode. Yeah, that's not going to help your ratings. If your ratings are already bad and now you've got a quarter of your affiliates saying, yeah, we're not going to air this show anymore. Again, I talk on the show about show business. Your job, I know you think you're an artist, and you are. You're an artist, but you're also in business to make money for the people that you work for. If you want to go be a starving comedian and do the Laughlin loop there, and do the all the Nevada casinos outside of Vegas, and do whatever material you want to do, go do that. I did some of those shows. I hated it. Great people, but it's not Vegas. Anyway, you accepted a job with the world's biggest entertainment corporation. They hired you to make them as much money as possible and make those shareholders happy, which they're not. Disney shareholders haven't been happy in a long time. And by the way, Jimmy Kimmel, being a hateful partisan, should be taken out back of ABC and shot in the throat, is something you will never hear me say. And I also wouldn't say he deserved it. He brought it on himself. The world is a better place without that hate-filled man. I mean, he brought his firing on himself. And I think television is a better place without that hate-filled man. The left is complaining about not being able to complain. That's what they're doing now. They're saying, oh, Jimmy Kimmel, oh, this is Trump, oh, we can't complain, oh. The combined might of the entire left media, academia, and Hollywood are collectively and in their combined power and influence all complaining about not being able to complain while complaining. When we come back, we're going to talk again about what a fascist dictator Trump is.
It's Mark Mosley Show.
And now, Shallow Thoughts by Al Ibrul. It's time to turn down all the hateful rhetoric. You can't shoot people just because they're evil, fascist, Nazi white supremacists. As I said before the break, the left is once again turning what happened to Jimmy Kimmel into Trump's fault. Trump's fault. Trump is Hitler. Trump is a fascist dictator. He's going to put us all on trains. I asked Grok, and as you know on this show, Grok sounds like Kronk or Patrick Warburton. I asked Grok if back in the 80s, or 2 whole generations ago, Ronald Reagan was accused of being a fascist dictator, authoritarian, Nazi, fascist tyrant, dictator guy. Here's what Grok has to say. Yes, throughout his presidency, Ronald Reagan was sometimes accused by critics of showing authoritarian or fascist tendencies. For example, left-leaning activists, especially in the peace, anti-nuclear, and labor movements, sometimes labeled Reagan as a fascist because of his hawkish Cold War policies, military buildup, and aggressive stance towards unions, like the 1981 Patco strike, where he fired air traffic controllers. Critics argue that his expansion of law enforcement powers in the war on drugs, support for covert operations abroad, and rhetoric about law and order reflected authoritarian instincts. Some punk bands and leftist intellectuals openly described Reagan as an authoritarian or fascist in their lyrics, art, and commentary. Musician Frank Zappa, in 1986, during a debate on CNN, said the biggest threat to America today is moving America toward a fascist theocracy. And everything that's happened during the Reagan administration is steering us right down that pipe. Yes, Reagan was polarizing. He governed within the U.S. constitutional system, though, and Congress and courts regularly checked his agenda. So now historians generally do not classify him as dictatorial, but they did then. A Penn State trustee once compared a speech by Reagan to Adolf Hitler's indoctrination of youth when he was addressing the young Americans for freedom. An article entitled "Liberty Under Siege, the Reagan Administration's Taste for Autocracy," published in Harper's in November of '85. The author argues that certain policies of Reagan were pushing boundaries of executive power and eroding civil liberties. Sounds familiar. Suggesting an inclination toward authoritarian governance. Whilst not saying that Reagan is a dictator, the language of that article was strong and critical of autocratic impulses. And this is why I laugh. This is why I chuckle when folks on the left are like, Trump is Hitler. Trump is Hitler. Because you guys have been doing this forever. Back to Charlie Kirk. Let's debunk some of the Charlie Kirk myths. There are so many out there. And I'm going to pick three. We will start with the black pilot comment. Take a listen.
If I see a black pilot, I'm going to be like, boy, I hope he's qualified. Because of DEI, it begs the question, when you see a black pilot, you wonder, you say, I hope they are qualified.
Charlie Kirk was talking in context about diversity, equity, and inclusion hiring over merit, especially in places where safety is and should be a priority, like when you're flying a big old damn plane. The original quote is followed by a panelist who then asks, "And you wouldn't have done that before?" "No," Kirk exclaimed, "that's not who I am. That's not what I believe." So he was talking in the context of living in the era of DEI. It's worth noting, by the way, that United Airlines, for example, has in recent years indicated that they intended to hire 50% female and minority pilots. An indication that they're not looking for the most qualified candidates so much as one that checks boxes. Now, that's fine if you're working at a travel agency, or if you're working behind the counter at American Airlines, or if you're checking baggage at American Airlines. But if you're in the cockpit of a jumbo jet with 400 people on board, that's another situation entirely. That's when you want the best person for the job. Again, addressing the quote on the Megyn Kelly show later, Kirk said, and I quote, "That's not what I believe. But what it does is it makes us the worst versions of ourselves, Megyn. That's the whole point of what I was saying. It's that I now look at things through a hyper-racialized diversity quota lens because of their massive insistence to try and hit these ridiculous racial hiring quotas. Of course, I believe anybody of any skin color can become a qualified pilot. That's never been my contention. I mean, it's silly, it's bigoted to think otherwise." What's really silly are some of these arguments, because they're just tissue paper. It's so easy, you guys on the left, it's so easy to just go look the quote up, look it up on YouTube, watch the video of the whole thing, see the context. But no, you don't want to do that. You want to stay in your cognitive dissonance. You just want to stay comfortable in your little bubble of Charlie Kirk was evil. I predicted this, I think, about 24 hours before it actually happened. I said someone is going to come along, someone on the left is going to come along and claim or assert or infer that Charlie Kirk is in hell. And Keith Olbermann, the Uber driver of the Democrat clown car, did not disappoint. When ABC Disney pulled the plug on Kimmel, he said, "Burn in hell, Sinclair Broadcasting. meaning the affiliate, the company that owns the affiliates. He said, burn in hell, Sinclair, next to Charlie Kirk. And there you have it. I used to say, going all the way back to the 90s, I used to say, there is an oxymoron that will eventually enter the American lexicon. I could see it coming all the way back in the 90s. I said there is an oxymoron that will enter the American lexicon, and that oxymoron is those evil Christians. And here we are. And it's just so clear that some folks on the far left, on the fringe, think that they're the moral superior ones, and that someone like Charlie Kirk, who was a Christ follower, is in hell for the things that you think he was saying that he wasn't actually saying. Let's move on to the next one. Quote, it's worth to have a cost of, unfortunately, some gun deaths every single year so that we can have the Second Amendment.
I think it's worth to have a cost of, unfortunately, some gun deaths every single year so that we can have the Second Amendment to protect our other God-given rights.
Horrifying, right? Here's the conversation in context.
So we need to be very clear that you're not going to get gun deaths to zero. It will not happen.
Right.
You can significantly reduce them through having more fathers in the home,
yes,
by having more armed guards in front of schools. We should have an honest and clear reductionist view of gun violence, but we should not have a utopian one. You will never live in a society when you have an armed citizenry and you won't have a single gun death. That is nonsense. It's drivel. Wow. But I think it's worth it. I think it's worth to have a cost of, unfortunately, some gun deaths every single year so that we can have the Second Amendment to protect our other God-given rights. That is a prudent deal. It is rational. Nobody talks like this. They live in a complete alternate universe.
Now imagine if someone said these words. The death of 3,500 children on average per year in car accidents in America is worth it to have cars. It would be a shock to the senses to hear that. It would be. But if people were out there making the argument, well, we need to outlaw cars because 3,500 children a year are dying in America because of cars, then you could make that point, couldn't you? And yes, some people would say, oh, you're a monster for saying that out loud. You're a monster for wording it that way. But every single person who heard it would in their mind go, yeah, I'm not giving up my car. I'm not giving up my car. I'm not. I need my car. By the way, guns kill on average 3,000 children a year in comparison to 3,500 children on average killed in car accidents a year. More kids are killed by cars than guns in America. But you'd never know that from listening to the left. We'll bat clean up with this one. The Asian slur. Take a listen.
I live like a capitalist every single day, Cenk. I live as a capitalist, okay? I live when I believe. No. What do I do? I get charity every single year.
So the left has been spreading this little clip around and saying that Charlie Kirk was using a slur for Asian Americans or Asians in general that probably hasn't been heard in this country in public in decades. It used to be a very popular thing to say post World War II to describe Japanese people. People just don't use that word anymore. It's not like the N word where you hear it everywhere. But he didn't say C-H-I-N-K. He said C-E-N-K. He was addressing the man who was heckling him from the audience, noted media figure Cenk Uygur, who is not Asian, he's European. He's of European descent. He's one of the Young Turks. That's who Charlie Kirk was talking to. He did not call an Asian person an Asian slur. You guys just don't realize You're the baddies.
Now we'll see how these Russians deal with a crack SS division.
Hans?
Have courage, my friend.
Yeah. Hans, I've just noticed something.
These communists are all cowards.
Have you looked at our caps recently?
Our caps?
The badges on our caps. Have you looked at them?
What? No. A bit?
They've got skulls on them. Have you noticed that our caps have actually got little pictures of skulls on them?
I don't,
Hans, are we the baddies?
Of course, we already know the left will frame this as more fascism. The mere investigation of organizations like Antifa, which, I'm sorry, Antifa's not exactly the most peaceful people. They're going around committing all kinds of violence and terrorism. Their whole goal is to terrorize people. The investigation of these organizations will be framed as political retribution. So, the media, guys, they're going to do it anyway. And it doesn't matter how you go about it. It'll be fascism. So please, Trump administration, don't let that fear stop you from doing it. They're just knee-jerk opposed to anything Trump does. So we already know the playbook that they're going to run. It's more proof, though, that Trump is Hitler, because literally everything Trump does is opposed by the left. Tariffs, for example. The tariffs. I have here a list of the only presidents in U.S. history to use tariffs. Here's the list. George Washington, John Quincy Adams, Andrew Jackson, Donald Trump. That's it. No, wait, there's more. I'll start over. George Washington, John Quincy Adams, Andrew Jackson, James K. Polk, and Abraham Lincoln, and Donald Trump. That's it. No, wait a minute. I left out a few. Let me start over. George Washington, John Quincy Adams, Andrew Jackson, James K. Polk, Abraham Lincoln, Ulysses S. Grant, William McKinley, Theodore Roosevelt, and Donald Trump. No, wait, I left some out. Let me start over. George Washington, John Quincy Adams, Andrew Jackson, James K. Polk, Abraham Lincoln, Ulysses S. Grant, William McKinley, Theodore Roosevelt, William H. Taft, Woodrow Wilson, Warren G. Harding, Calvin Coolidge, Herbert Hoover, Franklin D. Roosevelt, Richard Nixon, Ronald Reagan, George H.W. Bush, Bill Clinton, George W. Bush, Barack Obama, Joe Biden, and Donald Trump. Those are the only presidents that have ever used tariffs. But Trump can't use tariffs, and a federal judge has declared it so. Meanwhile, the news broke that the U.S. collected $30 billion in revenue in the month of August alone so far this year. In the first 8 months, $165 billion in the first 8 months of 2025, compared with $77 billion during Biden's last year, all of 2024. But he can't do that. He can't do that, you guys. So I wrote this. I think this would be good for the Babylon Bee. Maybe I'll submit it. We love the Babylon Bee on this show. I feel like this is a very Babylon Bee story. This just into the newsroom. A district court judge has issued a nationwide injunction against President Trump, ruling that Trump cannot put syrup on his waffles. New Hampshire Judge Milton Stanley issued his ruling on Wednesday, asserting that President Trump exceeded his presidential authority earlier this week when he was caught on video pouring an excessive amount of pancake syrup on a breakfast short stack. Judge Stanley was quoted as saying, "This is a dangerous executive overreach that presents a clear threat to American democracy. Donald Trump must be stopped. And that includes tamping down on his egregious abuse of breakfast condiments." In reaction, MSNBC host Reverend Al Sharpton had this to say. "President Trump's use of syrup on his pancakes or waffles is just another example of racist dog whistle, and a clear sign that this president wants to take us back to the days of slavery, when blacks were forced by their white owners to pour syrup on the white man's waffles. I mean, there was even a slave woman on a bottle of syrup, and Trump wants to take us back to those days when black women were subjected to being forced to appear on bottles of syrup.
Senate Democrat leader Chuck Schumer is quoted as saying, "The Constitution must be upheld, and it says nothing about a rogue president being able to just douse his food with Mrs. Butterworth's." And by the way, do you know who else was a big fan of pancake syrup? Adolf Hitler. And this just in a shocking new development, President Trump appeared defiant today when he was spotted substituting syrup by slathering his pancakes with very large pats of butter.
It's Mark Mosley Show. Follow Mark on X, Instagram, and Facebook at Mark Mosley. And subscribe for new episodes weekly on your favorite podcast platform.
Jason Statham is back. Look, I did my tour of duty. That war is over. He just wants to be a simple man, working a blue-collar 9 to 5. But the mob won't let him. Now I just want to have a quiet life and work a regular job. Now he must use all the special skills he learned to fight for his family. I told you, that's not me anymore. I just want to be left alone. Jason Statham stars in another Jason Statham movie. I just wanted to go to work. But now, I'm really gonna go to work. And he won't stop until he destroys the threat to his family and gets back to just being a regular guy. And I'll fight with whatever random objects are just lying around. Jason Statham is back in another Jason Statham movie. Sure, it's the same basic plot as a bunch of other Jason Statham movies, but you know you'll watch it anyway. Because it's Jason Statham. Starring in another Jason Statham movie. Oh, look, ladies. My shirt got ripped off again. Oops. Now playing. I like to think my dad would have chuckled at that one. He did like my humor, and he liked a lot of the comedy sketches that I've produced over the years. He liked my impressions. I don't think I ever did my Jason Statham impression in front of Dad. But he loved my Arnold Schwarzenegger and my Donald Trump impression and so many others. And I got my sense of humor from my father, who got it from his father, my grandfather, who I also adored and who was also a great man. My father passed away on September 7th, which is the reason why I didn't have a podcast episode last week, and a big part of why this episode has come so late in this week. We're going to get back on track next week and have a new show for you by Wednesday of next week. But we laid my dad to rest. I was honored to give the eulogy, which I will read here for you in a few minutes because I think it pays a fairly decent tribute to the man. I will tell you that my dad was 91. And my dad up until, and I, you know what, I'm stepping on the eulogy, so I'll save it for you. My dad had an incredible work ethic. I'll just leave it at that for now. But my dad, I was blessed. It's amazing how when you're a Christian, you tend to look at things through a different lens. You look at tragedy and you look to find the signs of God working through that. Just like I have with Charlie Kirk. You know, I look at the tragedy and I look for signs of God moving in that tragedy for good. The Bible, I said this earlier, the Bible says what Satan or the world intended for evil, God intended for good. And that's certainly true with the story of Joseph. It's also obviously 100% true with the story of Jesus, him being crucified and being resurrected. But my dad had been battling cancer in his lungs. It was in the early stages. So end of last year, they discovered it. And beginning of this year, top of this year, 2025, he did radiation and finished that. And I have posted, if you look on my Instagram, for example, you'll see a while back, some months back, I posted the video of him ringing the bell there at the facility that said he had finished radiation. But my dad was hospitalized about 3 weeks ago. And when I talked to my brother, we were talking about how serious the situation was. And I said, I should come, shouldn't I? Because my folks live over in Mississippi. That's where I grew up. Hattiesburg, Mississippi. And my brother said, yeah, you should come. So I did. I went, and not really knowing what I was going to walk into the first day I walked into the hospital room. I had 5 wonderful days with my dad 2 weeks ago. And when I walked in the room, physically, my dad is lying in this bed, and he's hooked up to all these different things. And he's got a catheter, and he's got breathing things and tubes and stuff. But my dad was 100% still there. My dad at 91 never suffered terrible memory loss or was plagued by Alzheimer's or dementia. He was just as sharp as I had always known him. And for that, I was so grateful, because I got to have some great times with my dad. We joked, of course, we always joke. In the Mosley family, everything's funny. Everybody's cracking jokes. We have a good time. And he was my dad. He was Glenn Mosley. And I was so grateful for that I wasn't walking into a room where there was a guy that I didn't recognize and who didn't know me, and you know how that can be challenging in itself. So I'm grateful because the Lord found a sweet spot. And I think my father deserved that because of the life that he led. God showed him mercies in that my father didn't go suddenly. So I did get a chance to see him. My other brother got a chance to get in there and see him as well. And we spent time with him. On the other end of the spectrum, my father could have languished for months on end and been one of those things. But there was the sweet spot of he didn't suffer for long, and his passing was relatively peaceful. And so I am forever grateful for that. I'd like to read you the eulogy. Oh, before I do that, though, I want to tell you another incredible thing that the Lord did, that another way in which he moved to make something beautiful. My son, Matt, who is a young man, and he's going for his degree in, basically he wants to be a pastor, and in fact already works at our local church in the youth ministry. He always tells people, I'm not a pastor yet, but that's what I'm working towards and studying towards. Well, my mom wanted her pastor there in Hattiesburg to do the service, and he couldn't. And so someone, my brother or my mother, came up with the idea, why don't we have Matt do it? And so my son, who is about to begin a life of service to God and to the community through a church as a pastor, had the honor of his first service of many that he will perform in his career to be that of his grandfather. And I thought that was just such a beautiful thing. I'd like to read the eulogy that I gave, and this is it. And this will say pretty much everything that I want to say to the world about my father. It was written for family and friends, but I think this will give you a clear view of who he was and what he meant to the world. It goes as follows. What defines a man's legacy, the mark he leaves? We know the world loves to define people by if they're rich or famous. Heck, nowadays you might even be defined by how many friends you've got on Facebook. Those of us who are believers know that the measure of a man is if he lived by the idea that, quote, the chief end of man is to glorify God and to enjoy him forever, end quote. Glenn Mosley, in my estimation, succeeded in living in a way that glorified God, as he taught all of us who knew him to practice the noble and righteous qualities that we find in the gospel, displaying honesty, humility, mercy, generosity, teaching us the value of hard work. The man was 90 and going to a job 5 days a week. I never met anyone whose mouth didn't drop open when I told them that. You know why he kept working? He would tell you that his doctor told him it was what was keeping him going, and that's true. But I also recently learned, Al told me, that's my brother, that he wanted to keep working until he could pay off the house. That's why in my house, Marie and I call him the Iron Man. Marie's my wife. These things that he valued gave him great value. Let me read just some of the Beatitudes from the Sermon on the Mount in the 5th chapter of the book of Matthew, and tell me if this sounds like Alfred Glenn Mosley. Now, this part obviously is for people that know him. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. Check. Blessed are the merciful, for they shall receive mercy. Check. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they shall be satisfied. Check. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called sons of God. Check. Blessed are the poor, pure in heart, for they shall see God. Check. Our dad didn't have to make any special effort, any deliberate attempt to focus his energies on imparting these qualities. They just poured out of him. That's who he was. His legacy is that he taught those things to his children, who could then impart them to their children, and so on to grandchildren and great-grandchildren. Not that we always embraced what he tried to teach us. Speaking only for myself, I often went my own way, thinking that I knew better. I had to learn some things the hard way, that the pursuit of money or fame or success, as the world defines it, that's not what's lasting. What's lasting is family. What's lasting is what you teach your children, that they can teach your grandchildren and future generations to raise better human beings. What lasts are the acts of service that you do to help as many other people as you can in life, and those things that inspire others to help others, and so on. A man can leave a lot of ripples in the water. Meanwhile, everything else just turns to rust or dust. Later in the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus says, "Do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth where moth and rust destroy and where thieves break in and steal, but store up for yourselves treasures in heaven." I'm still learning that, since God is still chiseling away at all my rough edges. And today I can't help but think, great. Now I'm going to have Jesus and Dad tag teaming me. When one gets tired of pounding me down all day, the other can tap in and keep beating me into shape, just spiritually coming off the top rope right onto my head. So I got that going for me. Well, we all do. But seriously, our dad, even in the way he imparted wisdom, was wise. Because he wouldn't grab you and shake you and say, "Listen to me, dummy, I'm trying to save you from screwing up." No, he would ease up next to you and say something like, "Well, Mark, let me ask you this." Or, "Well, have you thought about it from this angle?" He was sneaky. He was wise in his wisdom. And we all have to talk about the famous Mosley sense of humor. We all have it. Every Mosley in this room, you kids and you grandkids, you inherited it from all of us. Me, Al, and Robert got it from Glenn, who got it from James Preston Mosley. He was funny, and I'm sure it goes on back from there. And our prayer today is that you go out there and you be funny, to honor Papa Mosley, and that you strive to put into your daily lives all the other wonderful qualities that he modeled for us. If we want to honor him and make him smile and show everyone we know what Glenn Mosley's lasting legacy is, we have to strive to do those things. He showed us how, and he made it look easy. His work ethic, his compassion, his sense of mercy and justice, his gentle and modest personality, the way he loved his neighbor as himself. And isn't it a coincidence that all those things also please our Heavenly Father? I'll leave you with that thought to ponder. Glenn Mosley did glorify God, and now we'll enjoy him forever. May the Lord bless you all. I love you, Dad. Welcome back to Mark Mosley Show. We're going to wrap it up, as we always do every week, with our doofus of the week. In Carlisle, Pennsylvania, Derek Pittman has been charged with DUI. And he wasn't even behind the wheel. Check this story out. Cops pulled over Derek and his friend Lucas. Now, Lucas is behind the wheel. Derek's over in the passenger seat. Lucas, when the cops pulled him over, was holding a very large sandwich with both hands when the officer walked up to the car. The officer said he detected a strong odor of alcohol in the vehicle. So they gave Lucas the drunk test. Lucas, the driver. No. Lucas blew sober. So the cop asked the men why the car had been swerving all over the road. At which point Derek Pittman, not the driver, told cops he had held the wheel for Lucas while Lucas took a bite of his delicious sandwich. So they gave Derek the breathalyzer and found him to be as drunk as 1,000 Irishmen. Derek Pittman got a DUI from the passenger seat. Congratulations, Derek. You are the doofus of the week.
You're a big, stupid doofus.
No, you are.
No, you.
No, you. Please follow me on Instagram, Facebook, X, YouTube. And don't forget to subscribe, like, follow, thumbs up, hit the bell, leave a comment, share with a friend, give us 5-star on Apple. Just do all of the things. Do all of the things. You know the thing. And until next time, may God bless you with health, with joy, and with wisdom.